The sprint race for the Qatar Grand Prix is over and Oscar Piastri wins the race for McLaren in what was an exciting race filled with drama and excitement and incidents. But what did we learn from the race? Well, I am going to be taking a look at the sprint race and do a data analysis from what was a very hectic race. Now let's get into the video. As usual, I'll be talking about McLaren, Aston Martin, Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull later on, so stick around for that. Before I say anything about the sprint though, I just want to say congratulations to Max Verstappen for becoming a 3-time World Drivers' Champion. He has absolutely dominated the entire season, maximising everything within that Red Bull car. Now though, this sprint race, well, it was a race which saw the teams and drivers opting for two very different strategies. The first strategy was to play it safe and race on the medium tyre. This is something that we saw the majority of drivers do. However, there was an alternative strategy which was far more risky, but I believe it will set those drivers up better for tomorrow's Grand Prix, and that was to race on the soft compound of tyre and pray they don't fall off the cliff in terms of grip, and that way they would save a crucial set of medium tyres for the main Grand Prix. For those that started on soft tyres, you saw that they had incredible grip off the line, as Russell and the two Ferraris got excellent starts. However, Norris and Verstappen really struggled. The advantage lasted for all of about 5 laps roughly, and after that the soft tyre pace fell off a cliff. And how bad was that pace? Well, I've brought up the times of Norris, who was on the medium tyres, to Charles Leclerc, who was on softs. And you see that as soon as Norris got into clear air, his lap times dropped significantly, whereas Charles Leclerc on the soft tyre really lost time towards the end of the race as he ran out of grip. And you can see that with pretty much every soft tyre runner towards the end of the race, they started to sink like a stone as they had no grip left. However, as I mentioned, they have crucially saved an extra set of medium compounds for tomorrow's Grand Prix, so it will be interesting to see if this will play into their hands, especially as tyre wear in general was pretty high. Something that was not very high in Qatar tonight though was the grip at the beginning of the race, as we saw multiple drivers struggling for grip as sand had blown onto the circuit, and that meant that we saw a couple of drivers losing grip and beaching it in the gravel, such as Logan, Sargeant and Lawson. They saw their days come to a premature end. We also saw multiple drivers almost losing the back end at different times early on in the race as well. This is pretty interesting and something that the teams and drivers will have to be very wary of in the Grand Prix, especially at the early stages when they are high on fuel, because that means that when they're high on fuel, the cars will be heavier, and those heavier cars will be harder to catch slides. And that also means that heavier cars mean that they will do extra damage to their tyres. Due to the potential for high tyre wear in the main Grand Prix, we may actually see the teams being forced now into a 3-stop strategy, which is why those extra sets of mediums could be a lifesaver for some teams if they have to do the extra stops. So, after what we saw today in the midfield, what teams were looking good and what teams were not looking so good? Well, one team that did not look great sadly after a very strong Friday qualifying was Alpine, as Gasly's soft tyre gamble did not pay off and Ocon was knocked out of the race after an incident with Sergio Perez and Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas. But for Gasly, the pace on the soft tyre was just not there. And to show that, I've brought up the times of Gasly in the Alpine and Albon in the Williams, and of course Gasly who was on softs. Here you can see that initially Gasly had significantly more pace than Alex Albon. However, very quickly those soft tyres started to fall off for Gasly, and by the end of the race Albon is more than a second per lap faster, despite struggling for pace in qualifying when compared to the Alpine team. For Williams, they were undoubtedly the midfield team that benefited from today's race, as they were the only midfield team to actually finish in the points. Albon crossed the line in 8th, but finished in 7th place after Charles Leclerc was hit with a 5-second time penalty. In the race, Albon and Williams will be hoping that their usual tyre wear advantage will play into their hands, and hopefully for them, they will be able to get away with one less stop if it is a multi-stop race, and they may find themselves scoring some much more needed championship points as they look to secure 7th place in the team's championship. I just want to say that if you are enjoying the video, then I would greatly appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. I'm on my way to 5k subs and I would really appreciate it if you help me get there. Now though, let's get back to the video and let's talk about the top 5 teams, and let's start with McLaren. For McLaren, the sprint race was an incredible day and an incredible achievement as Oscar Piastri wins the race and Lando Norris recovers to finish the race in 3rd place as his mediums came in to save him towards the end of the race, as we saw him pull off some incredible moves around the outside of the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. For Piastri though, he had the pace over Verstappen, and even though at times it looked like Verstappen might catch him, he just did not have enough pace, and you can see that when we look at the times of the two drivers. For the main Grand Prix, McLaren can be very excited that their pace was strong. They had a pace advantage over the field, and really they were there or thereabouts with Max Verstappen. In my qualifying video I said that they will struggle for a podium, however after seeing what they achieved in the sprint race, then I very much believe that a podium should be possible for Oscar Piastri, that is if he can maintain the pace in the race. Piastri typically has struggled more when it comes to race pace in the Grand Prix, but the sprint race did show that he can manage the pace over a stint. For Aston Martin, they opted to take a gamble by having both drivers start on the soft tyres. Initially for Fernando it looked like things were going to work out, but much like with other drivers on softs, that quickly started to fade off as the medium tyres became the fastest tyre. Alonso, however, did manage to squeeze 1 point out of his sprint race due to Leclerc's time penalty. For his teammate Lance Stroll, however, pace was just lacking, and Lance finished down in 13th place. For Fernando, this race was actually pretty strong for him. He had decent pace on soft tyres and was better at tyre management than the Ferraris, and you can see that when you compare the times of Sainz to Alonso. Here you can see that for a decent number of laps that Alonso actually had a pace edge. It has been tricky for Aston Martin now for quite a while. However, with the prospect of a very high tyre wear race, then there is a potential chance that we could see Alonso finish in the top 5. For Ferrari, the sprint race was very difficult as both Leclerc and Sainz opted to start the race on the soft tyres. Much like everyone else, they had great pace initially, and after each safety car, they also had great pace as the medium runners were struggling to get the tyres up to temperature. But as soon as they were up to temperature, you could see that they were no longer a match for the medium tyred runners. However, their pace on softs was not particularly strong either, and to show that, I have the times of the two Ferrari drivers and also George Russell, who was also on soft tyres. And when you look at these times, you can see that Ferrari are in a difficult position. They don't have the pace on the soft tyre, and in general, they are losing pace faster than their rivals. This also was the case with Fernando Alonso, and going into the main Grand Prix, if tyre wear is going to be high, then this will be a large concern for the Scuderia. The only saving grace potentially for them is that they have saved an additional set of mediums for the race. However, that is also true for Fernando Alonso and George Russell, who will be starting the race already ahead of both Ferrari drivers. For Charles Leclerc, it will probably be very difficult for him to finish in the top 6, as I believe both McLarens and Mercedes will have the pace edge, as well as Alonso and Verstappen. For Sainz starting way down the order, the race will be much harder, and I believe if Ferrari is struggling this much with tyre wear, then he may struggle to even finish in the top 8. For Mercedes, the sprint race was a great result, as Russell finished in 4th place and Hamilton was in 5th place, and with them starting in 2nd and 3rd in the Grand Prix, then it should be very possible that at least one of them finishes on the podium. But how did they compare? Well, let's look at the times of the two drivers to see how the tyres dropped off for Russell. Very early on in the sprint race, you could see that Hamilton was struggling for pace. You could see that he did not have a lot of grip and was trying to battle through the field. At the safety car restarts, you can see Russell on his softs was able to get a great launch, but as soon as tyres came up to temperature, you can see that Hamilton starts to close in on Russell in terms of lap time. Now, Hamilton was still slower here in terms of lap times towards the end of the race. However, that was more down to the fact that Hamilton was still overtaking cars such as the Ferraris. when Hamilton and Russell get to the final lap and Lewis is now in clear air, you can see that he is approximately 1 second faster than Russell. For the race, Russell has an extra set of medium tyres, and it looks like this could play nicely into his hands. And finally for Red Bull, Max Verstappen becomes a 3 times Drivers' World Champion, and takes it in what was actually a difficult race by Verstappen standards in 2023. Off the line at the start of the race, Verstappen didn't get a good start. He lost multiple positions, which is something he will not want to repeat in the main Grand Prix. However, as usual, Verstappen had fantastic pace, and you can see that he had the pace advantage over pretty much everyone, but it was not as large as it has been in other races. Thankfully for Verstappen in the Grand Prix, McLaren are starting down the order, which will give him an opportunity to run away at the beginning of the race. Either way, this is the closest that anyone has really gotten to Red Bull, with the exception of the Singapore Grand Prix. So with that in mind then, what are my top 5 predictions for the Qatar Grand Prix? Well, in P5 I think it will be Fernando Alonso, P4 will be Lando Norris, P3 will be Lewis Hamilton, P2 will be Oscar Piastri in the McLaren, and Max Verstappen will win the Qatar Grand Prix. But that is my prediction. The question is though, what are yours? In the comments down below, let me know, and as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.